The knock tore through the midnight storm like a gunshot. Michael Turner's hand froze on the doorknob. For a heartbeat, the storm outside seemed to hold its breath. Then he pulled the door open, and 18 years of silence shattered. Rachel. She stood there, drenched and trembling, her hair plastered to her face by the rain. The woman who had once sworn forever now looked like a ghost resurrected from the grave of his past. And beside her, a boy clutching a torn duffel bag, his sneakers squelching on the soaked porch. "Michael." Her voice cracked, barely audible against the storm. "Is there still a place for me and for us?" The words sliced deeper than the wind. For a moment, Michael's world tilted. Here she was, the woman who had abandoned him with nothing but 20 words scrawled on a note, leaving him to raise their children alone. Now she was back, dragging a stranger into the wreckage she had created. Michael's knuckles whitened on the doorframe. Memories crashed like waves. The slammed door, the empty nights, the broken promises. His jaw clenched until his teeth ached. Why now? His voice was gravel, low and dangerous. After all this time, why here? Rachel's eyes shimmered with guilt, with desperation. Her shoulders sagged beneath the storm, as if the rain itself were punishing her. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "I lost everything. Please. He's my son. We have nowhere else." The boy glanced up, his eyes wide, uncertain, caught between fear and defiance. He wasn't Michael's, but he carried the weight of Rachel's choices like a scar already carved into his future. The storm howled around them, rattling the windows, sweeping through the pines. Michael could hear his heartbeat pounding louder than the thunder. This door was more than wood. It was the line between past and present, between betrayal and survival. He looked at Rachel, her face pale, her body shaking, and then at the boy, soaked to the bone, clutching the duffel as though it contained his entire life. The silence stretched, a knife-edge moment between mercy and refusal. Finally, Michael's voice cut through the storm. "What you're asking," he said slowly, "isn't a place in my house. It's a place in the life you burned to the ground." Rachel's lips trembled, her eyes begging for a sliver of forgiveness. But Michael's hand tightened on the door. The storm roared, the night waited, and the past refused to be forgotten. And as Michael's grip tightened on the door, the storm seemed to wait for his answer. Would you let someone like Rachel back into your life after 18 years of silence? Or would you close the door forever, no matter how desperate they appeared? Tell me in the comments. What would you do in Michael's place? And if you want to uncover how this story unfolds, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the most shocking twists are still to come. Before the storms and betrayals, there was a time when life felt tender. Michael Turner and Rachel Ward were young dreamers, building a world out of secondhand furniture and promises whispered in the dark. Their small house smelled of cedar shavings from Michael's workshop, where his rough hands shaped wood into cribs, shelves, and toys. Rachel laughed when Olivia, only 5, dragged her dolls into the sawdust and proudly declared she wanted to be just like Daddy. 2-year-old Sam wobbled after his sister, clutching a wooden truck Michael had carved. His giggles bounced through the kitchen like sunlight spilling across the floor. At the stove, Rachel hummed softly, her hair tied in a loose knot, her eyes still bright with the unbroken hope of youth. At night, they would pile onto the old couch, Olivia asleep on Michael's chest, Sam curled between them, Rachel's hand resting in his. In those warm moments, the weight of their struggles seemed to fade away. The roof leaked when it rained, and the bills often came faster than the money. But their laughter filled the cracks like gold. For a fleeting moment, love was enough, or at least it seemed to be. But cracks have a way of spreading in silence. The bills began to stack faster than Michael's paychecks. The faucet dripped without end. The refrigerator hummed like a weary old man refusing to die. Michael worked 16-hour days in the workshop, his hands raw from the saw, his back bent beneath the weight of responsibility. He told himself it was temporary, that if he worked harder, everything would improve. For Rachel, the waiting felt endless. Her friends posted photos of vacations in Napa, of diamond necklaces given just because. Their husbands came home in pressed suits, smelling of cologne instead of motor oil and sawdust. At church picnics, the women compared handbags, their laughter sharp as broken glass. Rachel stood among them in her faded dress, smiling politely, but the smile never reached her eyes. At night, when Michael collapsed into bed, too exhausted to speak, Rachel lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence stretch. She wondered if this was all life would ever be. The love was still there, yes, but wrapped in fatigue, buried beneath the monotony of scraping by. And in the quiet of those nights, a dangerous whisper grew louder inside her chest. You deserve more. And slowly, Rachel began to believe it. That whisper, you deserve more, soon had a name, and it was Victor Hayes. He appeared at Olivia's school one autumn afternoon, standing in the hallway with a tailored suit and the kind of quiet authority that drew every gaze. Silver cufflinks glinted under the fluorescent lights, and his cologne lingered long after he passed. Michael arrived late, his boots squeaking on the linoleum, hands still stained with varnish. Victor, by contrast, looked untouched by struggle, his smile practiced yet magnetic. Teachers leaned toward him. Parents listened when he spoke. Rachel noticed instantly. The contrast between the two men hit her like a blow. Michael's weary shoulders, the lines etched deep into his face, the smell of motor oil and sawdust, against Victor's polish, his confidence, his promise of something beyond survival. Rough day? Victor asked lightly, his eyes dropping to the coffee stain on her blouse. Rough life, Rachel muttered before she could stop herself. He laughed, not the distracted, tired chuckle she knew from Michael, but rich, genuine amusement that made her cheeks flush. Victor leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough. A woman like you shouldn't fade into the background. You should be traveling, shining, not vanishing in someone else's shadow. His words lodged deep, sharper than the guilt they awakened. And as Rachel looked back at Michael fumbling with Sam's shoelaces, the seed of temptation Victor planted began to take root. The seed of temptation Victor planted began to take root. Rachel told herself it was harmless. Just conversation, just a smile returned in a crowded hallway. But late at night, when Michael snored beside her, she replayed Victor's words like a forbidden hymn. You should be shining. You deserve more. The guilt clawed at her. She would kiss Olivia's forehead, tuck Sam beneath his blanket, and feel the weight of betrayal pressing down before anything had even happened. Michael's hands were blistered, his eyes lined with exhaustion, yet he still brought home small gifts. A wildflower, a candy bar, a carved toy. Rachel wanted to be grateful, but instead those gestures made her feel trapped, suffocated by the simplicity of a life she had once chosen. Victor, meanwhile, knew exactly when to call, during Sam's nap, after Michael left for another 16-hour shift. His voice was smooth on the other end of the line, painting pictures of Napa vineyards, Paris boulevards, weekends by the sea. He spoke as if the world could be remade for her alone. Each meeting stretched a little further past the boundary she swore she wouldn't cross. A coffee after school became wine at the Ritz. A walk through the park became an evening behind closed doors. Rachel's heart pounded with both fear and exhilaration. She told herself she could still turn back, but the truth was already there, pulsing beneath every stolen moment. She didn't want to. Rachel told herself she still had time to choose, but the choice arrived sooner than she imagined. Michael, unaware of the storm inside his wife, had been saving for months in secret. One Thursday evening, he walked through the door carrying a folded slip of paper and a hopeful smile. "I booked us a cabin at Lake Texoma," he said, holding it out like a prize. "Our first family vacation in 3 years. Just you, me, and the kids." For a heartbeat, Rachel froze. Michael saw a gift. She saw shackles tightening around her wrists. That night, as he packed fishing poles and whispered promises of campfires to Olivia and Sam, Rachel's thoughts drifted elsewhere. Victor's laughter, champagne against glass, the glow of city lights. The small house that had once felt like shelter now pressed in on her like a cell. When Michael finally fell asleep, one arm curled around Sam. Rachel lingered at the bedroom door. Moonlight traced every line of exhaustion on his face, every quiet proof of devotion. But instead of softening her heart, the sight hardened her resolve. This wasn't the life she wanted anymore. In the kitchen, she pulled a notebook closer. Her hand trembled, but the words came quickly, 20 of them sharp enough to cut 18 years to pieces. "Michael, I can't do this anymore. I need more than this life. Don't try to find me." She left the letter on the table, shouldered her bag, and stepped into the night. Behind her, the house remained silent, except for the steady breathing of the man who still believed she would be there when morning came. Morning came with the cry of Olivia calling for her mother. Michael stirred, reached across the bed, and found only emptiness. On the kitchen table, the letter waited like a death sentence. 20 words that shattered his world. For hours he sat in silence, the paper clenched in his hand, until Olivia tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, where's Mommy?" She promised to braid my hair. Her brown eyes searched his face, but no answer came. That first year was a blur of survival. Michael became both father and mother, packing lunches, braiding hair with clumsy fingers, rocking Sam through nights of nightmares that left the boy sobbing for a woman who never came. Olivia would sit by the window, backpack ready, whispering that maybe today Mommy would return. Each evening ended the same, disappointment carving her childhood too soon. Michael rose at 5 a.m., dropped the children at Mrs. Patterson's before school, then worked 16 hours at the workshop. His hands bled from splinters. His back ached from endless lifting, but the bills never stopped. Every time exhaustion tempted him to give up, he heard Sam crying in the dark, or saw Olivia's face pressed to the glass, waiting. He told himself, "If Rachel walked away, I will not." The nights were long, the house too quiet, and loneliness crept in like a thief. But Michael refused to let it win. He learned to braid hair, to cook pancakes shaped like hearts, to whisper bedtime stories when his own voice shook. In those bitter early years, love was no longer tender. It was forged in fire, hammered into steel, a father's vow never to abandon again. Michael might have carried the weight alone, but he wasn't entirely abandoned. In those bleak first years, a small circle of people quietly stepped into the cracks. Mrs. Patterson from next door often watched Olivia and Sam after school, her kitchen filling with the smell of fresh bread as the children colored at her table. At church, Pastor Green slipped envelopes into Michael's hand. Gas money, grocery cards, never with pity, always with respect. "You're not alone, son," he would say, his voice steady as oak. On weekends, an old army friend, Daniel Reyes, stopped by the workshop. He would roll up his sleeves, fix machines, or simply stand beside Michael when the weight grew unbearable. "Brother, we've survived worse," Daniel reminded him, their bond forged in trenches now tested in everyday battles. The community rallied in subtle, profound ways. Neighbors left casseroles on his porch. The hardware store extended credit without question. Even customers brought their cars, not just for repairs, but to keep Miller's shop alive. For Michael, every gesture was a lifeline. Pride made him want to refuse, but love for his children made him accept. At night, when exhaustion threatened to break him, he thought of those hands that reached out, and it gave him just enough strength to rise at dawn and keep going. Just when Michael thought he had found a fragile rhythm, life struck again, harder each time. The first blow came with fire. One winter night, sparks from an old machine caught the sawdust. Within minutes, flames roared through the workshop. Michael dragged water buckets until his arms gave out, but by morning, half the shop was blackened ruin. He stood in the ashes, the smell of charred wood clinging to his skin, wondering how to rebuild when there was nothing left. The second blow came with pain. During repairs months later, a support beam gave way, crushing his shoulder. The doctor told him his arm would take months to heal, but bills didn't wait. Michael learned to hammer with one hand, to steady boards with his knee, his jaw clenched through every throb of pain. He worked slower, but he worked. The third blow was the cruelest. Sam, still a small boy, collapsed with fever that turned to pneumonia. For 3 nights in the hospital, Michael sat by his son's bed, eyes burning from sleeplessness, praying to a God he wasn't sure was listening. Machines beeped. Sam whimpered for his mother. Michael held his tiny hand and whispered, "I'm here. I'll never leave you." When Sam's fever finally broke, Michael wept into the hospital sheets, not from weakness, but from the weight of a promise kept under fire. By the time they returned home, Michael was changed. The flames, the broken bones, the nights in sterile corridors, they hadn't destroyed him. They had carved him sharper, harder, like oak tempered by storms. Every scar became proof. No matter how much life tried to break him, he would not bend. After years of fire, loss, and endless nights, small victories began to break through the dark. Olivia was the first light. She buried herself in books, often reading by the dim glow of a single lamp after helping with chores. At school, her teachers marveled at her sharp mind and relentless discipline. By the time she reached high school, scholarships and awards lined the kitchen wall, each certificate a quiet rebuke to the mother who had walked away. Olivia dreamed of law school, not just to succeed, but to fight for families like hers, to give voice to those abandoned. Sam's hope came on the field. Though nightmares had once plagued him, the boy found release in the rhythm of soccer. Every kick, every sprint, every bruise became proof that he was alive, stronger, faster. Coaches saw not just talent, but hunger, the kind born from loss. By 16, college scouts were watching, offering the promise of a future Michael once feared his son would never have. And through it all, Michael remained the steady anchor. The townsfolk began to speak his name with respect, the man who never quit. Customers came to Miller's workshop not only for honest repairs, but to shake the hand of the father who had built a family out of ashes. He never boasted. Instead, every smile from Olivia, every cheer for Sam was his reward. In their triumphs, Michael saw more than success. He saw proof that the storm had not destroyed them. It had forged them. By the time Olivia turned 18, the Miller family had crossed a threshold Michael once thought impossible. The acceptance letter arrived on a spring afternoon, the envelope bearing the crest of a prestigious university. Olivia opened it with trembling hands, and when the words "admitted to the School of Law" appeared, she burst into tears. Michael held her close, pride choking his voice. "This is your future, Liv. You earned it." For a moment, the kitchen that had once echoed with sorrow now rang with laughter and hope. Sam's triumph followed not long after. Years of sweat on the soccer field culminated in a scholarship offer from a Division I university. The coaches praised his skill, but Michael knew it was resilience, the fire in Sam's chest, that had brought him here. When Sam signed the acceptance papers, Michael saw in his son not just an athlete, but a survivor who had transformed pain into power. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, stability crept into their lives. The workshop was no longer a fragile operation. Miller's Woodworks had grown into a respected business with steady clients and loyal employees. Michael could finally come home before midnight, cook dinner without collapsing from exhaustion, and watch his children plan futures that once seemed unreachable. The turning point wasn't just academic success or financial security. It was the realization that the years of sacrifice had not been wasted. Michael looked at Olivia, radiant with purpose, and Sam, burning with determination, and felt a rare peace settle in his chest. They had survived. More than that, they had begun to thrive. While Michael and the children were clawing their way back to hope, Rachel was living another story altogether. With Victor Hayes, the world unfolded like a glossy magazine spread. Penthouse suites replaced the leaky roof home she had abandoned. She sipped champagne under chandeliers instead of scrubbing dishes under a flickering kitchen light. Paris in the spring, Napa in the fall. Victor made sure her life was filled with photographs meant to inspire envy. Rachel convinced herself she had chosen correctly. At charity galas, she wore silk gowns and diamond bracelets, basking in the approving glances of women she once envied. When she scrolled past neighborhood friends on social media, still in modest homes with children at their sides, she felt a sharp satisfaction. "I was right to leave," she told herself. "This is the life I deserved." For years, she ignored the hollow ache that surfaced late at night when Victor's laughter faded and silence settled. She silenced it with another glass of wine, another weekend away, another dress that shimmered beneath the lights. Rachel believed she had outrun her past. She didn't know that every indulgence was only building the stage for her greatest fall. The glitter didn't last. Victor's empire, built on risky deals and borrowed money, began to crack. At first, Rachel ignored the warning signs. The tense phone calls, the late nights pacing, the whispered arguments with investors. But one morning, she woke to find the penthouse stripped of its shine. Creditors had come. Cars were repossessed. Bank accounts frozen. Victor didn't fight for her. He slipped out of her life the way smoke escapes a dying flame, quiet, leaving only the stench of ruin. No farewell, no promises. Just absence. Rachel tried to cling to what remained, but luxury vanished faster than she could grasp. She sold jewelry piece by piece, traded silk for second-hand clothes, and moved from penthouses to cramped apartments that grew smaller with every eviction notice. The same women who once envied her now whispered behind manicured hands, their eyes sharp with pity. Alone, Rachel saw the truth she had long denied. The life she thought she deserved had been built on sand, and as it collapsed, so did the image of herself she had clung to. For the first time in years, she wondered if Michael had been the one holding real treasure all along. After Victor vanished, Rachel drifted through years that felt like exile. She took whatever jobs she could find, waitressing in dim diners, folding clothes in discount stores, cleaning offices long after midnight. The woman who once wore diamonds now scrubbed floors for tips, her hands cracked from cheap soap and bleach. Then came Ethan. The child was born from a brief relationship that ended before it began. Rachel held him in a hospital room that smelled of disinfectant, staring at his tiny face with both love and despair. This time, there was no Victor, no safety net, no illusions of wealth. Only a crib bought secondhand and the heavy knowledge that she was utterly alone. Raising Ethan meant constant movement. Cheap apartments, borrowed couches, Weeks of uncertainty when rent went unpaid. Rachel skipped meals so he could eat, wrapped him in thrift store blankets against the cold, whispered apologies into his hair when he asked why they never stayed anywhere for long. The glamour was gone. In its place stood a weary woman and a boy growing up in the shadow of her choices. Rachel had once abandoned a family for more. Now she fought simply to keep the one she had left. The breaking point didn't come with bills or hunger. It came one winter night when Rachel found Ethan shivering under a threadbare blanket, his breath fogging in the cold air of their drafty apartment. She crouched beside him, pressing her body against his to share what little warmth she had. Ethan stirred, his voice small, fragile. "Mom, why don't we ever stay anywhere? Why can't we have a home?" The words sliced sharper than any creditor's threat. Rachel swallowed hard, her throat burning with shame. In his eyes, she saw Olivia and Sam, the children she had abandoned, waiting at a window that never opened. She remembered Michael's steady hands, blistered but reliable, the kind that built shelter out of nothing. For years, she had chased diamonds and chandeliers, trading love for luxury. Now, watching Ethan tremble, she realized what she had really traded: security, belonging, family. Tears spilled silently as she stroked his hair. She whispered an answer that wasn't for him, but for herself. "Because I threw it all away." That night, Rachel finally understood. Wealth had never been the treasure. The treasure was what she had left behind. It was a Sunday evening, the air heavy with autumn rain. Michael was setting the table when a sudden pounding rattled the front door. 3 sharp knocks, urgent, almost desperate. He froze. Through the peephole, he saw the face that had haunted 18 years of silence. Rachel. Her hair hung damp and lifeless, her coat clinging to a frail frame. Beside her stood a teenage boy, shoulders hunched, clutching a worn duffel bag as if it held his entire world. Michael's hand tightened on the doorknob. Behind him, Olivia and Sam, now grown, glanced toward the entryway, sensing the storm that had come home. The door opened. Rachel's eyes, hollow yet pleading, met his. "Michael," her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "This is Ethan. He's my son. We have nowhere else." The hallway seemed to shrink with tension. Ethan shifted nervously, glancing between his mother and the strangers inside. Olivia stiffened. Sam's jaw clenched. 18 years of abandonment pressed into a single moment, as heavy as the rain pounding against the roof. The past had returned, not as memory, but as flesh and blood on Michael's doorstep. The silence shattered when Olivia stepped forward. Her heels clicked against the hardwood, sharp as gunfire in the tense quiet. She stood face to face with the woman who had vanished from her life before she could even read her first storybook. Rachel's lips parted, as if to speak, but Olivia's voice cut through, trembling with rage. "You left me when I was 5, she said, her words shaking like glass about to break. "I sat by the window every night waiting for you. I thought maybe you were sick, maybe you'd call, maybe you'd come back. But you never did." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Olivia, I don't." Olivia's hand shot up, silencing her. "You don't get to call me your daughter. You don't get to show up with another child and pretend like those years never happened." Her chest rose and fell with fury, every syllable sharpened by 18 years of abandonment. Behind her, Sam's fists clenched, his jaw tight, but it was Olivia who carried the fire. For the first time, Rachel saw her little girl, not a child waiting at the window, but a grown woman whose love had been scorched into rage. Before Rachel could recover from Olivia's fury, another voice cut through the storm, deeper, sharper, carrying the weight of years. Sam. He stepped forward, his broad shoulders tense, eyes blazing with anger that had waited too long to be spoken. "You think you can walk back in here?" he demanded, each word clipped, deliberate. "You left Dad with nothing. Just us kids and a note, and he never quit. He broke his back, worked until his hands bled, so we could eat, so we could survive." Rachel tried to speak, but Sam's voice rose, fueled by the memory of nights watching his father stumble home, exhausted. "Do you know how many times I found him asleep at the table, too tired to make it to bed? Do you know who held Olivia when she cried? Who read me stories when I woke from nightmares? It wasn't you. It was him." The silence that followed was suffocating. Sam's jaw tightened, his fists trembling at his sides. "Don't you dare come here and ask for forgiveness," he spat. "You don't deserve his love. You never did." Ethan shifted uneasily by the doorway, his hands tightening on the worn duffel bag. The storm of voices around him, rage, accusation, silence, was a language he couldn't fully understand. All he knew was this: his mother was standing alone, and every word hurled at her landed like a blow. He looked at Rachel, her shoulders sagging under Olivia's fury, her face pale beneath Sam's accusations. To Ethan, she wasn't the woman who had abandoned children years ago. She was simply Mom, the one who had held his hand through sleepless nights, who had skipped meals so he could eat, who had whispered that things would someday get better. Why were they tearing her apart? Why did their words sound less like justice and more like cruelty? Ethan's chest tightened, anger and fear twisting inside him. He wanted to speak, to defend her, but the weight of the room pressed him into silence. His eyes darted between Michael's children, who stood like a wall of judgment, and Rachel, who seemed smaller with every second. In that moment, Ethan didn't see a history he never lived. He saw only his mother, cornered, diminished, humiliated, and it broke something in him. The room trembled with silence after Olivia's fury and Sam's accusations. Ethan stood frozen, eyes wide, clutching his bag like a shield. All eyes turned to Michael, who had remained quiet, his hand gripping the back of a chair as if to anchor himself. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, more dangerous than shouting. "Rachel," he said, each syllable weighted with 18 years of buried hurt. "Do you have any idea what you stole?" Rachel's lips parted, but no words came. Michael's gaze didn't waver. "You didn't just leave me. You robbed Olivia of a mother's embrace. You stole Sam's chance to be a child because he had to grow up too fast. And you left Noah, our baby, without even a memory of you." His jaw tightened, eyes glistening with restrained pain. "I worked until my bones broke, not because I wanted to prove anything to you, but because they deserved more than abandonment. And every single day, I watched them suffer for your choices." Rachel's shoulders shook, tears streaming unchecked. But Michael didn't soften. He leaned forward, voice cold as steel. "So tell me, did you ever stop to think about what your leaving cost them? Did you?" The storm outside beat against the windows, but inside the house, the silence was heavier. Rachel's tears streaked her face, her lips trembling for an answer that never came. Michael exhaled slowly, then turned toward the drawer by the hall. When he returned, there was an envelope in his hand, thick, white, final. He placed it on the table between them. "There's $800 in there," he said, his tone flat, unshaken. "Enough for 2 weeks in a motel, food, bus tickets. After that, it's your path to walk." Rachel blinked, confusion mingling with desperation. "Michael, please. I didn't come for money. I came for—" He cut her off, his voice rising, not in anger but in judgment. "You came for family. But family isn't something you get to reclaim when it's convenient. Family is the ones who stay, the ones who fight through the fire and don't walk away." Olivia stood taller behind him. Sam's jaw was tight, Even Ethan's eyes widened at the weight of his words. Michael stepped back, his hand firm on the doorframe. You burned this life to the ground 18 years ago. Don't think you can walk back in and call it yours. Rachel's sobs filled the space, but Michael's verdict had already been delivered. Final, irrevocable. The envelope lay on the table like a stone between two worlds. Rachel's shoulders collapsed under its weight, her sobs breaking the silence. Ethan stepped forward, his young face twisted with confusion and pain. Slowly, he reached out and gripped his mother's trembling hand. His eyes darted between her and Michael, between the man radiating unshakable resolve and the woman sinking into despair. "Mom," he whispered, voice cracking. "We'll be okay, right?" But there was no certainty in her tears, only the hollow echo of years she could never undo. Ethan's gaze lingered on Michael, firm, immovable, and something flickered in his chest. Respect, anger, longing, all tangled into one. He wanted to hate the man who had just exiled them, but part of him understood, part of him even admired it. Still, in that moment, Ethan chose the only thing he knew. He held his mother tighter, his silence screaming louder than words. Rachel's knees buckled, and she sank onto the threshold as if her body could no longer carry the weight of rejection. Her sobs tore through the night, raw and unrestrained, the sound of 18 years collapsing in an instant. "Please," she gasped, clutching the envelope as though it were both lifeline and punishment. "I have nowhere left." No one left. Her mascara streaked down pale cheeks, her hands trembling so violently that the paper crumpled. Every luxury she had once flaunted, gone. Every bridge she might have crossed, burned. Now there was only this, a door she could not pass, and a man she could not sway. Ethan crouched beside her, silent, his small hand gripping her shoulder. But Rachel hardly felt it. Her chest heaved, lungs fighting against despair, as the bitter truth struck her. She had no path forward, no refuge behind. The rain beat harder against the roof, echoing her collapse. Rachel had run out of illusions, and she had run out of time. Michael stood at the doorway, the storm spilling silver sheets of rain beyond the porch. Rachel staggered down the street, her figure shrinking with every step, Ethan clutching her arm as though he could hold her together. For a long moment, Michael didn't move. His children stood behind him, Olivia rigid, Sam grim, their eyes fixed on the same vanishing silhouette. The rain swallowed Rachel whole. Her sobs faded into the night, until there was nothing left but the echo of water beating on the roof. Michael exhaled, slow and heavy, then closed the door. The lock clicked like a gavel striking judgment. Inside, he turned to Olivia and Sam, pulling them close. His voice was steady, certain. Family isn't about who leaves. It's about who stays. And with that, the past was sealed, outside in the rain. The storm had passed, leaving only the steady patter of rain against the glass. In the quiet, a voice spoke. Forgiveness is a gift, but not everyone deserves it. Family isn't blood. Blood can betray. Family is loyalty, the ones who stay when everything else falls apart. The words lingered like a blade suspended in the silence. And then came the question, direct, piercing. If you were Michael, would you open the door? Would you let someone back after 18 years of silence? Now it's your turn. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you forgive, or would you close the door forever? Every answer reveals who we truly are. If this story struck you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more cinematic tales, and ring the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. Your voice matters, because stories live on through those who dare to answer.